Hey guys, George here with Islamophobia Watch. I trust you're all doing well and that you're doing something to fight back the tide of evil, is the best word that comes to mind. The tide of evil that seems to be sweeping throughout America. And if you live in Western Europe or Eastern Europe or wherever you may live, there seems to be a tide of evil that's sweeping throughout the world, forcing us into situations and into ways of living that we thought would be unthinkable only a few years ago. Only until last year, who would have thought that the globalist structures have the power and the ability to force us into what we have done since last year, since COVID. So in this segment, I want to talk about listening to the enemy, or hearing what the enemy is saying. Not listening to, but actually hearing what the enemy is saying. What I find out is that normal, good, decent people are busy with life. Life is tough. And most normal people, they go to work. They get busy with life. They just put the bulk of their energy and time into making ends meet, maybe, studying, working, improving themselves. That's the kind of stuff normal people do, right? And what happens is that a lot of us who really focus on just dealing with life itself, we end up not realizing how much evil there is, how much deception there is, how many lies that are being propagated all around us, and how many other people are busy with parasitic lives. People who live on, for example, welfare. There are people who live on welfare, haven't worked. Sometimes they don't work for years at a time. And they lose all capability of even working or being cognitive and just developing the skills and the discipline that it takes to keep a job. And they end up being dependent on the system, on the taxpayer, on welfare programs. And right now, America is being milked. There are people who are absolutely grifters. They're absolutely taking advantage of normal, decent people. And so, and then these people become the activists, the BLM activists, the Antifa activists. They somehow find ways to execute their parasitic schemes, and then they have time to regurgitate the propaganda that's being fed into their minds. And that's how you have BLM, Antifa, and jihadis and the likes. They know how to mismanage well their lives to a point where they have a lot of extra time to listen to propaganda. I would like to tell you that some of us need to learn how to hear what the enemy is saying. When I say the enemy, to me, neo-Marxist organizations are the enemy. They are enemies of everything that's good, ethically speaking, morally speaking. I don't look at them as necessarily the enemy that deserves to be lined up against the wall. I look at them as ideological enemy, opponents, if you will. And people who are propagating terrorist ideologies like Marxism, make no mistake, Marxism is a terrorist ideology. Marx himself was a man who propagated terrorism. He wrote about it openly. He wrote about it himself at the time when his first newspaper was shut down. In the last edition of his newspaper, he wrote about it. He said, when we come to power, I don't have the exact quote here in front of me, so I'm quoting from memory, but he said in the last edition of the newspaper that he was editor of, the authorities in Germany shut it down. He wrote in it, when we come to power, we ask for no mercy and we will show you none. We ask for no mercy and we will show you none. That is who they are. Antifa is a terrorist organization. BLM relies on terrorist tactics. It's all because Marxism relies on destroying the existent order so they can resurrect, so they can construct their utopian, better social order. That's who these people are. They depend on violence. Without violence, there would be no communism. Nobody in their right mind will support a government that builds gulags. The same with Islam. Islam is not a religion. It's a militant ideology. Nobody in their right mind would elect or choose to be taken over by these terrorist armies. Nobody's going to choose to be raped. Nobody's going to choose to be plundered, taken advantage of, enslaved. Everywhere Islam went, there was genocide. Genocide in India, genocide in Persia, genocide in Africa. Everywhere, genocide in Europe. Everywhere Islam went, it established itself not through some clever preaching, not through sermons from the imams. It established itself through terror. This is one thing that both Islam and communism have in common. It's not their ideology. It's not their ideas. Their ideas and doctrines or teaching or whatever ideological content there is to their message, it's only a front. The real power is in the terror, both with communism and Islam. And that's why it's so important, fearless people, to speak out, because nobody's hearing this. Normal people are busy living their lives. They're not going into the history books to investigate history. They're not reading those books. They're just minding their own business. And that's the problem with conservative people, with Republicans, with normal people. Today I was just randomly scrolling through the channels on my Sirius XM radio, and here it is, channel 127, Progressive Radio. And this woman was talking to the man on the host, and they were discussing all kinds of issues. But it's just, all you have to do is listen in on one of those programs. Just listen. Just listen to what these people are saying, and you realize that they're living in a parallel universe. You realize that they actually think that January 6th was insurrection, because that is what they've been sold. That's what they've been convinced. They're listening to this propaganda 24/7. They're convinced that their revolutionary utopian idea of America is so much better. It's awesome. And the problem is all those people who are just talking about the Constitution and freedom and such. They're convinced of global warming or climate change. They're convinced of those things. That's a matter of life or death to them. And all you have to do is listen to them. All you have to do is go to Memory TV on the internet and watch and listen to some of the videos. God bless the Memory Institute. What they do is they translate speeches from imams, sheiks, all kinds of Muslim ideologies and ideologues, and they put them up on the internet because there's a language barrier. All you have to do is just watch 1 hour of Islamic videos to realize that there are millions of people that are entrapped in this type of thinking. And when you do that, when you take time from your busy life to understand what kind of people we're dealing with, you realize that basically represents a threat, a danger, because these people are being worked up. They're being worked up all the time. They're being fed lies. They're being the flames of bitterness are being stoked continuously in those people. The victim mindset is being continuously affirmed in them. They actually have stunted development. Marxists, communists, leftists depend on constituents who are deeply deeply entrenched in a victim mindset. They're the victims because, a victim has the perfect permission to do anything. Think about it. Think about a real victim. Think about a real victim walking down the street and some pervert tries to attack this woman, for example, right? To try to rape her. Let's just take one example that should be pretty vivid and outrageous to just anybody. So what can the victim do? The victim can do anything. She can punch. She can pull his hair. She can poke his eyes. She can kick him in the balls. She can pull a gun, a knife. She'll do anything. If a woman got attacked and some pervert tried to attack her and she had a knife and somehow got the upper hand and cut up the guy in her rage, they're not going to do anything to her. She could maim the guy. They'll just say, well, she was afraid. When someone is afraid and they're a victim, they can do pretty much anything. And that's what they're doing. That's how this works. Once you convince someone they're a victim, and once you convince them that so-and-so is the victimizer, the wealthy, the rich are the victimizers, and you poor little proletarian, you're the victim, and you just keep feeding this mindset, then the next thing you tell them, you got to fight. And you know what? It'll just the end justifies the means. Anything goes. Anything goes. Same thing with the Muslims. They're being taught that, and they say to you, when you try to talk to them about jihad, they say, well, no, we don't believe in aggression. We believe in defending ourselves. And so they explain all of jihad with defending themselves because they're victims. You see, and you just say, well, there's a slight problem here. Where exactly was Muhammad a victim? Was he ever a victim when you read the fairy tales about him? If he ever existed? And you realize after a while, when you examine these totalitarian ideologies, that essentially the people who run these totalitarian regimes, communism and Islam, the people at the top, they depend on drones. They depend on faithful little jihadis and soldiers and the Antifa activists and the BLM activists. They depend on people whose personality is dysfunctional, whose bodies are mutilated and they have lost a sense of dignity and their hearts are full of self-hatred, and then they turn the self-hatred towards others. That is who we're dealing with. That's the enemy. And I'm not advocating for violence. I'm just telling you who is out to destroy us. I'm telling you these people have worked very diligently for many decades. They have worked in providing the building blocks at the university level, at the city level. We now have a legislator right here in Minnesota who is operating 100%. This BLM activist who essentially, he was stopped for a missing license plate, just a random traffic stop. And the police released the camera, the body cam. And like literally 2 minutes into the conversation the officer had with this man, he first of all intimidates him and tells him, I'm a state representative. And the next thing he just literally switches gears on him and right away begins to accuse the officer of racism. That's what we're dealing with. These are not reasonable people. There is no fairness involved there. They're only interested in gaslighting you, shutting you down, paralyzing you in fear, immobilizing your ability to rationally defend yourself, and taking over and crushing your entire way of life and turning you into essentially just a proxy to their scheme. You just need to be there for them. You need to work and pay taxes so they can grab and they can do what they need to do. Fund terror, redistribute the wealth, enrich themselves, like the woman from the BLM founder who ended up stealing probably millions of dollars, buying herself a nice house in a nice neighborhood. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with shameless people, and all you have to do is listen to them. So if you have people that you're, people who are important to you, and you can't win them over. And sometimes all you have to do is just listen to what they listen. And then you'll understand why you can't win them over. It's because they've been brainwashed. They bought into the false, deceptive narratives that have been pushed onto them. And it will help a lot for normal, decent people to take time just about right now to stop for a moment and to listen to what the enemy is saying. The enemy of everything that's good and civilized and decent here in America and around the world. If you just listen to what they're saying and you realize, listen to them and believe them. Believe them when they say it. If they say it, then you say, okay, well, that's what you're saying. Then that's what I'll believe. You said it over and over again in 15 different ways. If you read the Quran, if you listen to the imams, if you listen to it's not just an incident. It's not just one thing they said. It's over and over and over again, the same thing. 1,500 ways. In the last 1,400 years, they've said the same thing. We'll take over. We'll subjugate everybody. And the left is the same. They want to take over as well. And I guess these two are always calculating who is going to take over the other party once they take over. So I guess the left and jihad end up fighting with each other at the end of the day because that's how totalitarian regimes are. They can't have partners. The only partners they can have is partners at distance, like Russia funding Iran or China funding Iran. Stay over there. We'll hear, and we'll play some games. We'll bomb Israel. Okay, we'll fund you so you can bomb Israel, but don't get too close because they will kill each other. That's what they do. That's how they function. So take the time to listen to what the enemy's saying, and then educate others.